Good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from the Slovak mission to the European Union. I'm Jamie Shea, a senior fellow at Friends of Europe. And as you know, if you follow our Critical Thinking Live series, we have the opportunity to interview from time to time some leading European political personalities. And our guest today certainly fits that bill. He is the Foreign Minister of Slovakia, Rastislav Káčer. And I'm delighted, dear Minister, dear Rastislav, if you allow me, to welcome you today for two reasons. Number one, because you are a distinguished diplomat. Before becoming Foreign Minister, you've had a long parcours, ambassador in Washington, ambassador in Prague, ambassador also in Budapest. You've been Minister since September 2022. But more personally, if you allow me, I'm delighted to be able to interview you today because we go back a long way. I remember you when you were in the Slovak delegation at NATO in the 90s, 10 years before your country joined the alliance. So you are definitely a father of Slovak membership of NATO. From the time you were State Secretary in the Ministry of Defence, handling NATO affairs. And of course, the role that you've played outside government with GlobSec and the Slovak Atlantic Council and really developing civil society engagement with European values. I'm going to flatter you, but this is from the heart. For me, you're one of the big transatlantic personalities of my generation. So very pleased to, as I say, have you in this conversation for about 30 minutes or so. But
you too kind. Let me play the ball back to you, because I came to NATO early 1994. We were opening liaison offices. Yeah. You remember this Manfred Werner wing was opened. Manfred Werner was still Secretary General, actually, and I was there at the funeral ceremony. I think it was in August.
Indeed, yeah.
Month when I was coming. I think I was of the first two Slovak liaison officers at NATO. There was Vigata Zušacka, me, and Robert Chell.
Yes, who went on to have a NATO career as well.
And you have to tell you that you were probably one of the first people as my diplomatic acquaintance in my diplomatic career over the 30 years. So whoever I meet in the diplomatic circles and we say we are long acquaintance, you would be at the top of the list of those people. And not only that, you were somebody who I admired so much for what you have done there. You served so many times to me as a role model in how you do things. So, and this is not saying because I'm with you here.
I know that.
This is just a fact of the old times. Sometimes I get nostalgic by that, but it's important to say. I feel urged to say.
Rastislav, that means a lot to me. Thank you very much. To go to the immediate issues, you're here in Brussels because naturally you attend the Foreign Affairs Councils, the meetings of the foreign ministers of the EU, which have been going on yesterday with defence ministers. The headlines are all about, of course, the supply of ammunition to Ukraine. So I have to ask you about that first, the important decision to spend €2 billion on purchasing equipment, but also developing defence industry. How quickly do you think all of this can happen? I mean, clearly the Ukrainians need this ammunition yesterday rather than tomorrow. How do you think it's all going to work? Tell us a little bit also about what role you think the Slovak defence industry can play in retooling to produce all of this ammunition.
I think almost everybody around the table, because there was a strong consensus, what I felt is saying we need to be substantial and we need to be fast. And when Dmytro Kuleba spoke to us in the morning through VGC, he stressed that the speed and the quality of delivery is of the essence. And I think we know it. So if you would ask, I think interest of all of us is to act fast. On free-tier track, and first is important, to give everything what we have at disposal now. And some of our countries still have large ammunition, large caliber ammunition on the stock. So first deliver that what we have on the stock almost immediately. Then squeeze production, what we have as much as we can. And third, invest into new productive capabilities. Here, Slovakia has a role. Not everybody can produce large caliber ammunition. I think it's around 10 countries or so, 11 countries who could do large caliber ammunition. Slovakia is one of those. It's traditionally, you would remember after dissolution of Czechoslovakia, that part of heavy defense industry was Slovakia.
Yes, indeed.
It went into crisis How weird today when we speak of crisis, there was nobody to sell the weapons. Now we cannot produce fast enough. What a coincidence. What a bloody coincidence, by the way. I would rather be in the old crisis years ago. But truth is that we have kept that capability, and we are very good in comparative mode among other states of EU and NATO, that the large caliber barrels, there are also not too many countries which can produce a large caliber barrels for tanks and heavy artillery. We produce heavy artillery, so there's a self-propelled howitzer, large caliber 155 NATO ammunition, which we deliver to Ukraine, quite a few already. And the large ammunition, still the Soviet-style calibers, 122 and 155 in particular. So we are one of those, and we are talking to owners of the factory, because it's 50, I don't know what is percentage, roughly 50-50, owned by Ministry of Defense or by government, and then by private owner, and there is a plan how to boost it. So answer is yes, fast, boost the capacity. Slovakia can play the role. This was a lengthy reply to four.
No, but it was a good and full reply. Just a quick follow-up question. Is this an opportunity also to merge the European defence industry more? For example, I saw that Germany was suggesting that countries could join German orders, for example, to Rheinmetall if they so wish. Are you thinking of international partnerships as you go forward here?
Yes, this is one of the lessons from the crisis. Just at the lunch before this interview, somebody said crisis is always an option, and this is an opportunity. And we know from our own personal life crisis that if you survive the crisis, you can come out of that stronger. And this is the opportunity for all of us. However, this war waged by Russia against Ukraine is unfortunate, unprecedented, and unacceptable. We got into crisis, and it's big crisis, and this is also a big opportunity for all of us. What is good news here is that we got out of this united more than we probably would have expected a year ago. Because if we would turn clock back on day D-1, most of us still were saying, no, this is not going to happen. Not me, but most of people were saying, this is not going to happen. They are only pretending. Probably they will do a little thing somewhere in Donetsk and Luhansk, but full-scale operation.
Yeah, that's right. I remember.
Boom, happened. Then D plus couple of days, we were thinking whether Ukraine can stand.
Yeah.
And there were already a nightmare scenario that if Kyiv fell down, and this blitzkrieg would be a success, what we would do. Then, thanks to bravery of Ukraine, their patriotism and their efficiency, we got the time to unite. And good news is that Europe united more than we expected. Look at Germany, talking to Germany about Russia before, they were all saying, no, let's be friendly.
That's right.
This is only business. There is no strategic thing. Now, when I see in FAC, Annalena Baerbock, she's the most ardent supporter of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right.
So, we walked a great and long way. And I truly think this is an opportunity for Europe if we stay united. Because I think there is no way back now. We cannot back from supporting Ukraine. If Ukraine falls, I think we run into huge troubles, us in Europe.
Just staying on this theme, Minister, do you think that we're sort of getting European strategic autonomy by the back door? I know that this expression, albeit in the EU Global Strategy of 2016, has not always been very popular in Central and Eastern Europe, but what you describe, Europe spending money together, acting geopolitically, merging the defence industries, doing the training for the Ukrainians, etc., talking about merging air defence. Are we sort of getting a kind of European strategic autonomy from grassroots up? Would you go as far as describing it that way? I suppose it's good for NATO, right? If it means that Europe could take on more responsibility.
Absolutely. Here I would start. When I look at Slovakia, I'd be self-critical. Only a couple of years ago, we were spending barely 1% of our GDP for defense. And our defense capabilities became close to zero. We were always only relying that NATO will help. So we were only kind of free riding on the allied security, on joint security, which was not good. This is not, for a long time, you cannot do it like that. And when we were in the United States, this was all the time a core saying, be responsible, otherwise how we will advocate for that. So I understood always, but this was so hard in internal politics, say we need to spend more on defense.
Yeah.
When government was saying, we need to spend more on hospitals, schools, social care, and I don't know what. Now we see that without security, what would be the social care to poor Ukrainians in Mariupol?
Yeah.
Nothing. If all of your life shrinks into one plastic bag and walk with your child outside through muddy road. So that's it. Now this is becoming clearer and clearer, so nobody's going to dispute it. I was always extremely skeptical using the term of European army in particular.
Yeah.
This was shooting me because I say, don't use inappropriate words. Don't have an inappropriate ambition. Even as a state, you start first of all with a common notion, common sense, common concept of security policy and common strategy. And then you start to build other instruments on top of that. And joint army, for that you need a lot of joint confidence and a lot of other things. You don't start with that. This was like starting to build a house from the roof down. Or I started to date you, and on the first date, I'm starting to propose a mortgage and free kids.
Got it, yeah.
You are going to run away. So this is very inappropriate.
Don't run before you can walk, yes.
and through the back door, I don't know. This is through on-job. This is an extreme on-job training.
Yeah.
This is an extreme on-job training. And we are moving there. And if there is one lesson or two lessons, what we get here. One is lesson of strategic dependency in strategic areas. And this is not only about the gas, oil, nuclear fuel, and other things, but this is also critical supplies for strategic affairs. And that relates to Russia, that relates to China.
China, yes.
So that is a lesson for Europe. And there is also a geographical lesson, and there is also a strategic lesson. So you don't want to have your eggs in the basket, which is too far away, and then in the place which might be gone in its couple of, and it's completely irresponsible. When I was in India now, I was talking to my fellow minister, Jaishankar. He said, it collapsed. All of our trust in Russia collapsed. All what we were buying from there, it's gone, and we're never going to trust them again.
That's very interesting, particularly from the Indians. But Minister, you mentioned obviously burden sharing, the need for people to take defence seriously, to make a great effort. Going forward, it looks as if we've got this enormous challenge. I've called it in something that I wrote, the army of the East and the army of the West. Looking at Ukraine, even after this terrible war has come to an end, there's obviously going to be the need to continue to give Ukraine significant military support. NATO also has to retool, re-equip for its own defence and deterrence. Are we going to be able to do the two, to maintain two sort of very large structures? And do you think that it's going to mean sort of 3% or 4% of GDP on defence becoming the norm? I mean, I've heard some people say that Europe is going to have to sort of go back onto not exactly a war footing. That's probably exaggerated, but at least a sort of a degree of mobilization that we don't normally associate with peacetime, right? And do you think politically we can sustain all of that?
Yeah, we don't have peace times, and I know it's hard still to understand for many people, but we're front line. Not only Slovakia and Poland, in Baltics, all Europe is front line. When you would look at Russian propaganda, and not only propaganda, Medvedev is not propaganda, he's official, and many other officials say, we need to give a lesson to Europe. This is not about Ukraine. If somebody thinks here in the West that this is about Ukraine, that's not about Ukraine. They're not going to stop at Ukraine. Ukraine is only a pretext. It's only a first move with a stone on the chessboard.
Yeah.
They're saying we will stop in Berlin and we will stop in La Manche. So we need to give a lesson. Well, the regime cannot survive without confrontation. This is what I was saying before. A number of us were saying Putin will need to call for confrontation, because otherwise this autocratic, inefficient regime, which is completely incompetitive, not invest many technologies. Like McCain said, that's the fuel pump run by mafia, and that's it. And, you cannot run this indefinitely in open, globalized world. So how you do it, you create conflict. Through conflict, potentially, you create new Iron Curtain. And behind the Iron Curtain, you can start to cultivate a cult and a regime which will portray the rest of the world like an enemy. And I think this is the goal of Kremlin regime, to create new division of world where they can keep their way of life. I mean, in terms of politics, means authoritarian, autocratic blaming for the rest of others, that we are poor because of you. I know it's foolish.
Yeah.
I know it's unsustainable for a long time. But
that's the logic.
This can go out of control. So we need to brace up for long period of confrontation. This is not about a year or two. Even if Ukraine was successful and will push Russians out, which I think they can, or even there was a kind of ceasefire and some kind of frozen conflict, which I would hate that happening. But this is not a quick end. You know, we need to get ready for a world which is much less secure, and we will need to invest in defense. But I want to come to one point which you mentioned. And you put finger on, I was saying this long ago, because then they ask about the forces for EU, forces for NATO, but then you can add the peacekeeping operations for the UN,
Yep.
and then your own national defense. And when we were doing the review of defense back at home, I was always saying, look, we will never, ever be able to have a special, kind of a structural force, that this will be a force assigned for EU operations, this for NATO operations, this for peacekeeping operations, and this will be for national defense. No way, it's a single force, which needs to have a single logic for your own national defense, but then it needs to plug in as a piece of puzzle.
Be adaptable for different missions. Yeah.
So I don't think that we will ever be that strategically independent, not because we would want to be politically, but just practical planning purposes doesn't allow that. There will be a completely foolish ambition. For what we should aim is what we are always saying, a strong European identity within NATO. So we are not dependent completely on NATO structures, but we can have within the umbrella our own European operations, which we will be completely independent from the United States. Though to me, in my ideal world, I'll do everything to keep strategic alliance between the United States and Europe. This is, to me, absolutely essential. But we saw what President Trump was doing. He was killing that. He was killing the spirit. He was poisoning all we can, and we should do everything to prevent this happening again. I think together we are much stronger. And with the globalized world, if Russia will even become weaker, and they will become weaker, they're already much weaker, this will mean China, which will be much more stronger.
Yep.
We don't know how stronger, and we don't know what will be the ambition of China. They invest 30% in defense everywhere. Their budget is growing up. They invest in technologies, unlike Russia. They are nuclear state. If you speak to their neighborhood, they are all scared. So, we need transatlantic alliance. We always needed that, but we need it now probably more than ever before.
Minister, I agree entirely with that, and I would turn it around, if I may, and also say that even the United States is not strong enough by itself to deal simultaneously with Russia and China in the other direction, and therefore certainly needs the partnership with the European and the Asian democracies. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, remaining, so I'd like to ask, at the very minimum, two things. Number one, you'll be going to Vilnius in July for the next NATO summit. NATO's had a lot of summits and it's done a lot, sending battalions to Central and Eastern Europe, increasing the size of the reserve forces, rapid response forces, holding exercises. Does NATO need to do more in terms of enhancing its defence and deterrence posture? What would you like to see happening at Vilnius? Or you think that it's pretty much okay the way it is and NATO can just sort of stick to what it's doing at the moment?
Well, I'm quite happy how things are evolving. NATO, President Macron, not a long time ago, said there is a brain death.
Oh, yeah, remember that.
I was laughing on that even that time, but okay. There was a question mark over what is NATO for here, and these Fukuyamistic vision of the end of history, which was never here, but whatever, now we see that there is a great cause for NATO than ever before. So I'm happy that now we don't need to painfully explain that why we need NATO. That is a clear thing. That's a good thing. What is good that NATO reacted on this crisis by pushing the troops around the eastern flank. So we have in Slovakia NATO forward presence. It's excellent message for people because we gave up on our air defense system immediately in the first days of attack. So the system S-300 went from Slovakia to Ukraine, but was immediately filled in with NATO air defense capabilities by Dutch, German, and Americans. Now Americans being replaced by Italians, which is also good news that people see rotation of troops. People see there is a
solidarity sort of thing.
Solidarity that one is coming, one is going. And there was this fear of US domination. And in Slovakia a year ago, when we were signing the defense cooperation agreement with the United States, this Russian propaganda was saying, oh, now you will be flooded by Americans and they will raping you and they'll take you over. Well, it's not happening. They came with Patriots and they are gone with Patriots. Now, even we are begging them to stay. So overall, it's good thing that from Baltics down, all of the eastern flank, NATO is present. And we should work that as a permanent presence, I think. So it's credible. And look at the capabilities, which will be the good response for the current crisis.
You're in the headlines, Slovakia, this week with lots of positive stories because of the donation of the MiG-29s. Poland is following as well, and so I need to ask you: Are you giving the MiG-29s because you feel that they could be a game changer for the Ukrainians? And the broader question, and you mentioned a moment ago that you do think the Ukrainians could push the Russians back, and there's a sense of that I hear that it has to be this year because otherwise we may see public support beginning to fade, or we run out of weapons if we can't produce them fast enough. So it is the strategy behind the MiG-29s a sense that you can also encourage other European countries to also give aircraft. So, what do we have to do to help the Ukrainians win now while they still can? And is again, coming back to our first question, is it all happening fast enough, or would you like to see a lot more?
Personally, I would want to see faster speed of reaction on some critical technology. We spoke to our allies in the process. I could say it's not a secret that there was some hesitance among a number of allies, including the United States, including big allies, to rush with certain technologies which may have far reach. I think there was a kind of fear of escalation that Ukraine may go out of territory, which will give Russia pretext to use tactical nukes or whatever. So there was some hesitation on some pieces of technology, and you would recall reactions when Ukrainians were asking for jets, that this was generally refused. I would just recall what I said minutes ago. We were the first to send the air missile system, air defense system. Then others followed. Now Slovakia and Poland comes with critical capabilities. There was not a consensus complete, but we feel that countries are leaning. So we want to go by example. But second thing, it's our neighborhood. It's happening in front of our garden in the courtyard. So we have to do something. We have to do more to help Ukraine on that. Whether that's critical capability, I don't think that is too critical in the quantity what we sell, but it serves, again, it can create a little avalanche. And I think other countries with F-16s and F-18s can follow, and I hope they will do. And I'm happy. In Slovakia, this was not non-controversial. When I was in London, I spoke to James Cleverly. He said, look, I have to tell you that I admire your courage of your government, because for me, that's easy. Because what we do for Ukraine, it's widely supported. The truth is that Slovakia is a victim of Russia's very aggressive disinformation campaign.
Yes.
We got 60% of people were against sending armies, only 25% pro. There was even in the opposition, in the parliamentary opposition, there was a hellfire on us. I'm threatened to go to jail. I'm threatened on life for being part of this decision-making process. But I think this was the best decision strategically what we could have done, and I'm very proud about it.
Thank you. Minister, time hopefully for one final question. I wish we had more time, but you mentioned Russia, you mentioned China, you mentioned that this could be a sort of a long contest in terms of values and security. And of course, President Xi is in Moscow at the moment, meeting Putin, and a lot of the body language is, the rise of the authoritarians, and they're going to shape the future, and the democracies are in retreat, and the like, and we're getting our comeuppance for past arrogance, particularly as we look at 20 years since the US invasion of Iraq, of course, in these days. So, from your vantage point, what do we have to do, sort of geopolitically, over the next few years in order to maintain Western liberalism as a concept? And as part of that, is there an outcome of the Ukraine conflict that could help to deter future wars? At the end of every war, there's always a sense of the war to end all wars, and we're going to come out of this strengthening the international system in a way that's going to make future wars less likely. I mean, there's a lot of talk about crime of aggression, war crimes trials, and all of this, making Russia pay. But, as you look more globally, are you sort of pessimistic about the future, or do you think that the Western democracies still have certain advantages that they can play?
I'm unbeliever that the democracy, it's a system which is not probably perfect, but all of other are less perfect. So in all of the imperfection, it's all the time battle. It's never won. In democracy, this is like in a relationship. All of us who are long enough to have long relationship, we know how complicated it's to keep a human-to-human relationship on long run. It's everyday care and it's everyday battle. And democracy is very much like that. So, but I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in relationships. So democracy, that's the best relationship. It's a hell otherwise, but it's the best relationship of what we can have. So I'm a believer in that. Second one I want to say, World War II gave us a lesson on which we took that lesson and built a system of international law and the organizations, and we call it a rule of law-based world. For that we have UN, we have Security Council, permanent members, and all the mechanisms of peacekeeping operations, authorization, etc., etc. Well, now it feels like it's not perfect as well, and we need to do some fine-tuning for that, because one of the members of the permanent member of the Security Council, a nuclear power, crushed that system, which was here for a very long time, and was not crushed in this way. Never happened since World War II. That a permanent member of the Security Council will just take over its neighbor and say, you got no right to exist in mine. That's it. Never happened. So this is a problem, and we need to do something about that, but it's $1 million question as well. Yeah. So at the end of this war, we may take another lesson to step up with a more global and more resilient system to prevent things like this. But last, I want to touch a little bit on China. When I was 3 years ago discussing in Moscow the strategy, it was a trilateral dialogue, US, Europe, Russia. And there was a guy, he was with us. He was 10 years liaison at NATO. What is his name? At the time when I was in Moscow, I was deputy foreign minister for security. You would remember him, Andrei, whatever. And he said, we will give you a lesson to Europe, and you will understand that we are powerful and we will crush you, and China will be our ally, and China will be our strategic partner. This was 3 years ago. Yeah. And I told him, look, in what way you are partner to China? Yep. In what? Well, you do. You got raw materials, you got nukes, and that's it. That's it. You don't invest in technology. You nothing. If something here, Europe is your partner, not China is your partner. And I said, why you're so stupid? Why you're so blind? Why you still
to want to go with
for cooperation? You remember in 90s, what was our preoccupation in NATO? How to stretch the hand to Russians for cooperation. We were offering all possible ways how to drag them in the cooperation. At the end, they started, but then they left and they said, no, we don't want this. And now it's clear. And then I told him, look, the only thing what you will do confronting Europe is that you will erode Europe. Europe will become weaker. You will come definitely weaker, and you are already weak. And you will only lower down the fruits for China to become much more competitive on a global scale. But China, it's not that crazy like you are. China cannot crush Europe or United States, because whom they will sell the shit.
That's right.
For the world. So, they will only leverage up in this relationship, and that's it. And you will help them. And they will use you as a toilet paper in this game.
Yeah. Mr. Káčer,
it's becoming reality.
You're right. That was prophetic, and unfortunately, depressingly, it's come true. Mr. Káčer, thank you so much. That was a grand tour d'horizon. I'm really grateful to you for answering all of the questions characteristically, frankly, honestly.
I learned from you.
Completely. And making this such a substantive critical thinking live. Thanks again for your hospitality here today, to your colleagues for also helping us to fix things up. And please stay in your post as long as you humanly can. We need you. Thank you again.
Jamie, thank you for your invitation, and thanks to Friends of Europe. Thank you very much. It was a very lovely.